All right, kindergarten. So today's going to be your first experience glazing. So I just want to explain to you a little bit about what glaze is. So glaze is a paint that you use on clay, and it creates a really tough, hard, and shiny coat on the outside of the clay that winds up protecting it. So if you ever look at your mom and dad's coffee mugs and how smooth and shiny they are, but on the bottom they're kind of rough still. And that's because the glaze gets put around them. You paint it on, it goes inside the kiln, which is the big hot oven where your clay pieces went to change from this gray color to this white color. So, you put it in the kiln, it gets really, really hot, and your glaze becomes molten glass. So it becomes liquid glass. And then it goes through its cooling process where it cools down so you can actually touch it, and it creates a protective layer around it. But to make sure we have that protective layer, you have to make sure that you put 3 coats of paint all around your clay piece except for the bottom. Because when it becomes liquid glass, liquid likes to run all over the place. And if the liquid runs onto the bottom or the shelf of the kiln, your clay piece will get stuck. And the only way to get it off is to take a hammer and whack it off to try to get it. And do you think your clay piece is going to survive that? Yeah, it's not going to. So I always try to, but if you aren't following directions, it's really hard to get it to survive. So when you are glazing, you have to make sure you're creating a really tough shell for your piece. So what you're going to do is you're going to paint not 1, not 2, but 3 coats of glaze. So 3 coats of this paint. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my piece and I'm going to look at my paint. So remember we talked about how you use the glaze chart. And I'm going to look at this and just look for the letters. If you need help figuring out what it says, ask somebody. So it says medium blue. So I'm going to paint medium blue. And you can paint different colors all around it, but whatever color you paint or whatever colors you paint, you have to paint them overlapping each other's in the same spot 3 times. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my glaze, just like paint, I wiped it off on the edge, and I'm going to start to paint it on. And I'm going to keep painting. And if it gets in your hands, it's totally fine. It's really easy to wash off. So I'm going to paint all the way around, and I actually, between coats, I'm going to have to wait for it to dry. So I'm going to keep going, and you'll be really surprised at how quickly it dries. So I'm going to paint. Noticing I'm using a lot of paint because the more paint that I use, the more protective my shell is going to be. So keep going. Notice I'm not getting paint on the bottom of my pinch pot. Keep painting, getting it in my little holes if I made textures or patterns. Alright, so now I've gotten all the way around it once, so I can start to do my second coat. And then maybe I'll change directions on how I'm painting my second coat. And I'll paint all the way around. And then continue painting and keep going. So now what coat am I on? Am I on 1, 2, or 3? I'm on my second one, so I have to paint how many more? I have to paint 1 more, so I'm going to go back again. I'm going to paint my last coat. Now, if you got glaze on the bottom of your pinch pot, wait until the end to wipe it off. And there's a very good chance that we're all going to have to wipe off the bottoms of our pinch pots at the end. See, even I'm going to have to wipe it off a little bit. So I'm actually going to flip it over, and now I can change color. So I'm actually going to paint the inside a different color and the outside a different color. So I'm going to go to my next paint. So if I want to change paint colors, I'm not going to move the different containers. I'm going to pick up my piece with 2 hands, and I'm going to carry it with both of my hands, and I'm supporting it on the bottom and holding it with my hand. And I'm going to carefully walk over to the next table or walk up to the glaze chart to see what color I want to use. And am I going to move my paintbrushes, or do the paintbrushes stay? They stay with the paint. So I'm going to pick my next color, and I'm rolling it all around in the color, and I'm going to start to paint my next color. And this is one of those colors that it's going to look very similar at the end. So there's a lot of texture inside, and texture is what something feels like. So I'm going to make sure that I'm dabbing on a lot of the paint so that it gets really deep down inside of that texture. I'm going to keep going all the way around. And even though I'm using a lot of paint in here, does this count as 2 coats or does this just count as 1? Yeah, it still just counts as 1 coat. So I'm moving it around and I'm really making sure I'm paying attention to where I want it. Alright, so I have everything painted in once. I don't have any of that clay showing underneath. I'm going to look around, maybe ask a friend if they see any spots. Alright, so now I'm going to take some more paint and I'm going to do my 2nd coat. And I can keep going around. And finally I have to do my what? My 3rd coat. See how once you're on your 2nd or your 3rd coat, how it goes a lot faster? Yeah. So with that texture, you might not be able to see it all now, but at the end, when you get this back, you'll see all of that texture that you worked really, really hard to put in your clay piece. So I have one area left. I have this outside edge. And you don't have to paint yours the way that I'm painting mine, but this is how I want to paint mine. So I'm going to take it, and I'm going to go along this outside edge with a different color. And I'm using what's called sour apple green. So if I look at this color green, it's kind of changing colors, but see how it's a little bit more shiny? This is what it'll look like at the end. So I'm going to keep going. And I'm painting. And now, is my paint getting down in those holes? Not really. So I'm going to take a little extra paint. I'm going to try to go down into those holes to make sure that I'm making a protective layer all around my clay piece, because I want it to be really protected, because when you leave clay unprotected, it can get hurt. Like your mom wouldn't let you go rollerblading without any helmet on or bike riding without a helmet on, so you need to make sure that you are protecting your clay piece. All those little holes, and all of that last little hole is going to be shoes, that one too. Perfect. Okay, so I painted 3 coats on everything. So I have my inside, my top edge, and my bottom painted. So what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to take it over to my teacher, and I'm going to have her help me, or I can do it myself, wipe off the bottom. So I'm going to take a sponge that's just a little bit wet, so I dipped it in my water, and then I'm going to squeeze it out. Not going to wring it out, just squeezing it out a little bit. I'm going to hold it, and I have it on a flat surface, and I'm going to rub in a circular motion the bottom of my vessel. So, and I want to go a little bit on the edges, a little, to make sure that wherever it touches the kiln shelf, where it's going to sit, that it doesn't get stuck. Because remember, the only way to get it off is to take a hammer to it. And I don't think your clay piece is going to survive a hammer. So, when it's all done, put it in the finished box, and you can free draw.